Hey everyone, future me here. I just wanted to say a couple things before we get into this video. The first of which being, I know this is a pretty long video, so I'm gonna try to leave timestamps in the description below. I've never done that before, so hopefully I can figure out how to do it. So if they're down there, great. If they're not down there, sorry. The second thing, I am just an amateur producer, and the things that I'm going to talk about in this video are just things that I've learned over time. I've never had any formal training or anything like that, so everything I know is self-taught. That's probably going to be obvious in the way that I describe some things. So if I don't use the technical terms on something specific, that's why. Hopefully this video is able to help out someone that was maybe in my position a while ago or in my position now. You're just trying to figure some things out. And then the third thing, I have a surprise at the end of this video. It's something that I'm really excited about, so make sure you stick around until the end to hear what that is. All right, let's get into the video. What's up everyone, my name is AJ Lindsey. I am a guitar player, musician, and producer in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. I'm really excited to make this video today because I'm going to be talking about something that's really special to me, and it is a song that I wrote and produced back in 2021, released it in May of 2021. It's called Stained. If you haven't listened to it, you probably should go listen to it before you watch this video so that what the things that I talk about make a little bit more sense. But what I'm going to talk about today is how I produced that song. So I'm going to go into the software and show all the stems within that song, all the plugins that I use to mix and master the song, and I'm just really excited to talk about it because it's kind of like going down memory lane for me. It's a really special song to me when it came out. It was the first one that I ever fully released, so it just holds a special place in my heart. So I'm excited to talk about it, and let's just dive right in. Alright, so here we are in Logic Pro 10. This is a software for music making. I think it's really user-friendly. There's other softwares out there like Pro Tools or Ableton, but you know, I started making music with a MacBook in GarageBand, which comes free if you have a MacBook. And so the transition from GarageBand into Logic Pro was super easy. And so this is the software that I use. I'm a big fan. I think it's also cheaper than some other DAWs is what they call, or digital audio workstation, or software if you just want to use layman's term. So this is what it looks like. This song is relatively simple. There's not a whole lot of instrumentation. That was kind of intentional. We felt like the style of the song didn't need a whole lot of crazy sounds going on, so we kept it pretty simple. And as you can see, there's only 22 channels, but I will admit I went back and re-recorded a lot of things multiple times, so this did have a lot more channels than you're seeing right now. A lot of them have just been deleted, so that's, I guess, the first thing that I'll note. What you're seeing right now was not how it started. I cleaned it up a lot towards the end. It was a mess, but I think that's just part of the creative process. You put a lot of things down and some things you take away, but I like where it ended up. I like the instruments that we ended up using, or the sounds that we ended up using. The first one that I'll talk about is the piano. So I actually wrote this song on a piano. I'm primarily a guitar player, but I do know a little bit about piano, and just felt like the style of the song, the speed of the song, it just kind of called for a piano. So with that being said, the pianos that I chose to go with, here I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'm actually using two piano sounds. The first is a stock piano sound called Steinway Grand Piano. And this is what it sounds like. Well, here we go. So all of these little lines that you're seeing are bits of MIDI information. It's basically just the note. Here we can expand it a little bit. Each one of these is a note that I actually played on a real piano, but the way it records it is in these, you know, bits of information. So I can go back and I can move each note later on, which is super cool. Big fan of MIDI as opposed to just recording some form of audio file, which is, you know, less editable. So yeah, so these are all the MIDI notes for the first piano, and it is panned slightly to the right. And then the other piano that I use is from an external plugin. I only use stock plugins except for this one, but this one is free. It's the Labs Soft Piano. I think it fits the mood of the song, and it sounds like this. So you can definitely tell a difference between the two pianos. I love the way that sounds. And this one is panned a little bit to the left. So when you add them both together, one pan slightly to the left, one pan slightly to the right. And again, I recommend you watch this with headphones on or with good studio monitors. That way you can actually hear the sounds that are on the left side and on the right side. So both of them together, I'll start it here. This is what it sounds like. So really simple. Again, I'm not like a crazy piano player, so it's a really simple piano part, but I like it. And then for like effects and things that I added to those pianos afterwards. So on the soft piano, there's an EQ. Looks like this. I took out a lot of the low end because later on in the song, when the low end kicks in, I don't want the piano's low end to clash with like a bass low end. So a lot of low end taken out of this. And then I also added a tape delay. So just a very hard to hear delay, but it is there. Short feedback, just adds a little bit of character to that piano part. And then that is sent to two buses for reverb, but I'll talk about buses a little bit later. We're going to go into how I routed everything towards the end of the video. But so that's the soft piano. And the Steinway grand piano, there's a little bit more low end here, but a similar EQ structure. I added a compressor to this one. And again, a tape delay, very subtle tape delay. And that also gets routed to certain reverbs, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so those are the piano parts. Let's see, is there anything back here? When we get to the bridge, I wanted to kind of elevate the song a little bit, so I start playing it higher. I go up an octave and play those notes higher. And that's for the whole bridge. It's a bit more exciting part. And there's also more instrumentation under the piano. So I moved them higher to make some space for some other instruments. Next, if you just have a piano playing, it can sound kind of empty, and I love the way adding a pad or a drone or texture, whatever you want to call it. I love adding that to songs, and so I went ahead and did that right here. So originally, and I can't show you it right now, but again, this was just a MIDI format, and I chose a software instrument, and I just played this. It's just a long droning note. But when I bounced it, I turned it into an actual audio file, and it sounds like this. I have it fading in. I'll talk about automation a little bit later, how I got it to fade in like this. But this plays throughout the whole song. It's just a calm drone. I think it's just sitting on the root note of C. The song is in the key of C, so just droning on that. And then later in the song, when we get to the turnaround after the first chorus, I add another pad, and this one's panned all the way to or not all the way, but about 32, I guess, minus 32 to the left. So if I play this, you're only going to hear it on the left side. And this one is a bit brighter. Again, less low end. Very subtle, but it just adds some texture and some, I like to think of it as glue for the song. So if there's any empty space in the other instruments, the pad can fill that in. The effects that I added on those two pads, on this one, it is just an EQ, and I took out a lot. So a lot of high end, a lot of low end, and then some, pain points. Each one of these, maybe I should talk about EQ for a second. If you don't know what this chart is, this is the entire frequency range of the sounds that you're hearing. So all the low tones, like if a tone that would go to a subwoofer versus the high tones that go to what's called tweeters. So all of this, all these moving parts, that's the frequencies that are coming out of this pad sound. So the goal in EQing is to take these little items and move them around and find frequencies that really don't sound good. You can widen this if you want. And wherever you find a frequency that doesn't sound good, like this, for example, hear that? That right there? I don't like that, so I can narrow this and I can remove that frequency. And that's what I was doing. So anyway, that's EQ at a high level. It's super important, and there's plenty of videos out there that can explain a little bit better how to EQ things. You should definitely go check those out. This is how I EQ'd this pad. And then on that first pad that I showed you, same, a lot of high end taken out, a lot of low end taken out. And there was one frequency in there that I just didn't like, so I took it out as well. But no other effects on those pads. Okay, the next item is the vocals. So one of my good friends, her name is Samantha Churn. She is a phenomenal singer, and I'm really glad that she was willing to sing this song for me. So I'm not necessarily the best vocalist myself, but she is amazing. So she came over, we recorded here in my bedroom. I bought this, I'm using it right now, but this Shure SM7B, I think is what it's called, microphone, to get her vocals down on it. In its pure form, it sounded great. I can actually show you what it sounded like in its pure form if I turn all the added effects off. Oh, let me turn these reverbs off too.
Something small from you, something that could tell me that you cared for me too.
So yeah, so that's raw vocals, except for one thing that I can't really show you without messing up a bunch of stuff. Logic does have this feature where you can, every song has a little bit of auto-tune on it. So I'm not going to sit here and say there's no auto-tune on anything that you're about to listen to. There definitely is. You can kind of correct pitch as you go along. She didn't need a lot of it, just to clarify. But what we're looking at down here is the audio file, and Logic can read each note that she is singing and give me the ability to edit that pitch a little bit. So I can hold that down. That's a note that she's saying. That's a note that she's saying. If you want to work on vocals and you're not sure how I got to where I am, just double click on your audio file. It'll bring this up, track file or smart tempo, leave it on track. And this button is the flex button. And there's a couple options you can do with flex. You can move the timing around a little bit, but for what I want to show right now is the flex pitch. And it then kind of reads the file and allows you to move items around. So that's what we're looking at right now. So I would suggest, if you want to edit vocals a little bit, play with this, and I just learned by going into it and messing around with notes. It's kind of fun to see what you can do. But yeah, so that's, the tiny bit of pitch correction that we did. The other settings that we used for Sam's vocals, move over here. So starting with a compressor, this doesn't do very much, but it takes the loud notes as she's singing, makes them a little quieter, takes the quiet notes as she's singing and brings them up a little bit so that the volume of her singing stays the same as the song goes on. After the compressor, we go into an EQ. Again, took out a lot of low end for a female vocalist. You don't need all that low end. Honestly, you can't really hear it, and if anything, it's just going to muddy up the song. So I took out a lot of low end. Again, found some frequencies I didn't like, found a couple frequencies that I did like and boosted them a little bit. But Logic also gives you some options to, so if you click on, this drop-down arrow, you can go to a couple options where it, gives you a preset EQ, which is really helpful for someone starting out. So this is the EQ for her vocals. Then there is a pitch correction plugin, which I do have, but it's very subtle. The lower this is, like about right here is where you can't really tell anything's happening. So it's just down a tiny bit just to clean up any stray vocal parts that she may have had. But using this plugin, you can set the scale, so a major scale in the key of C, and then it'll kind of correct any stray notes. But it's very subtle for this song. If you want like heavy auto-tune, like T-Pain or something like that, you would just turn this fast all the way down. I guess I can show you.
I only ever wanted something small from you.
So you can hear it jumping around quite a bit. But we don't want that, so it's just subtle. Then the last thing is pretty important when it comes to vocals, and it's called a de-esser. So it takes all the harsh consonants, the t's, the t's and the s's, and it's kind of like an EQ for those specifically. And you can set where that frequency is and how much it reduces the volume or reduces the harshness of that t's. And definitely an important plugin if you're mixing vocals. Sometimes you can use multiple de-essers to fine-tune certain frequencies. I just have one on here. Again, super important. After Sam's vocals, I guess we'll jump into mine. I did sing harmony on this song, and I have 2 channels with my vocals on it. I recorded one for, I think this is verse 2, or it's verse 2 and chorus 2, and then I'd come in on the bridge. I had a separate track for certain parts in the bridge because I just needed to mix them slightly different. So for my vocals, since I'm doing harmony, I'm not the forefront of the song. I'm a lot quieter than she is. There's a lot more effects that I put on my vocals because I felt like the harmony needed to be pretty perfect, pretty connected to what Sam is singing. And what I mean by that is the timing needs to be pretty perfect. You'll also notice that there's a whole lot more pitch correction, mainly because I'm not the best singer in the world. But I wanted those notes to be, exactly where they needed to be in regards to harmony. And since it wasn't going to be at the forefront of the song, since I was harder to hear, it's okay if there's more pitch correction on it. That's my personal preference. Other producers might think differently. They might want to go for a more pure harmony, but not me. I don't see the need. My vocals are subtle, so it's okay if I doctor them a lot. But what we did on my vocals is I also have a compressor. It's compressed a bit harsher. And then I also have an EQ, a bit wider on my vocals. Since my vocals are a bit lower than hers, just naturally, there's a bit more low end compared to what she had. Again, I have some frequencies taken out and frequencies boosted, but don't need this high end for a male singer. So after that, we go into pitch correction. Same thing here, just C major scale, a little bit of response time, and then I have a de-esser on my voice as well. And I guess we can go ahead and listen to this soloed. I'm a little embarrassed, but here we go. It takes a little longer. It sounds horrible when you listen to it by itself, but when you combine it with her vocals,
of when you were here, I tried to clean my messes.
So yeah, those are our 2 vocals combined for that second verse. And that's everything I have for vocals. The only other thing I'll mention is they're all panned to the center. If you add a bunch more vocals, I would recommend maybe look at panning them a little bit, having some just in the left ear, having some just in the right ear. It can really widen the effect of your song or make the stereo image of your song a lot more wide. Now, all of these are being sent to a bus, which I should turn back on. It's being sent to a bus, and that bus is, let's see, it's some reverb, adding some space to the vocals, as well as a little bit more EQ, or no EQ at all. I don't know why that plugin's on there.
How'd that get in there?
But again, I'll talk about these bus routings towards the end of the video because they're kind of complicated. There's reasons why I do them, but I can explain more later. Okay, so after vocals, I want to talk about the electric guitar that I added. I had to add electric guitar. I'm primarily an electric guitar player, so it just felt right. It felt wrong to not have electric guitar. If you haven't seen my pedal board video yet, I would encourage you to do so. My board wasn't complete when I recorded this song. I used a lot of pedals that are on my current board to do the parts for these. But jumping into the electric guitar tracks, the first part where it comes in is the instrumental after the first chorus. And this is what it sounds like. So I knew I wanted some form of little riff right there. And I also wanted it to be simple and soft. I didn't want it to be invasive to the song at all. It's a very calm part. So I kind of kept that in mind when I was writing that part. And I also kept that in mind when I was mixing it. As you can see, there's a lot of effects on this. So I guess we'll just talk through them. Honestly, there's more here than I realized. The first is a noise gate. I added a noise gate to this track because with an electric guitar, or at least with my setup, it has some hum to it, which I don't love. So the noise gate shuts off all sound coming out of the track for everything that's below a certain decibel level. That's great because when I'm not playing my guitar, it'll shut off the hum sound. So that's what this is used for. These are the settings. I'll go ahead and play it just to see what would happen. So if you watch this open and close, if the open is lit up, that means the gate is allowing sound to come through. If the close is lit up, it's closed. And it closes it and opens it back up when I start playing again. And you may also see this right here. There's a gap here. I cut the track, so that also helps eliminate the hum. But at the parts where the track is actually there, the noise gate is acting. After the noise gate, there's a pedal board plugin. I didn't have a chorus pedal at the time, so I added chorus in post. And there's just this retro chorus. These don't even need to be on here. The retro chorus is the only one that's on. And then there's an amp function. So just added a little bit more, grit, crunch, EQ, whatever you want to the guitar. Let's see what it sounds like with this on and off. So when I recorded it, I had my tone knob way down, and I decided a little bit later that that was a bit too low on tone. So adding this amp plugin allowed me to brighten it a little bit using these effects. There's always going to be other ways that you can brighten a sound. I just use the amp in this case. I mean, that's a good tip. There's not one way to do the things that I'm doing. I just played around with it for a long time, and I don't know, I like the way the amp sounded with it. But I would encourage you to, get creative, find a plugin that you've never used and see what it can do. So that's what I did here. Then this tremolo, I ended up not using this, so it's off. That's why it's grayed out. So, honestly, I could just do no plugin right there. It doesn't change anything.
How'd that get in there?
Okay, then I wanted to add some reverb in post. When you record electric guitar, if you have a lot of reverb going into the DAW, it can sound pretty washed out or muddy. So I record it with just a little reverb coming out of my pedal board, and I add reverb when I'm actually in the software. It just helps the reverb stay clean. So that's what this is. This is Platinum Verb stock plugin. And then there is an EQ. Again, took out a lot of low end, raised some of this high end here. And then a compressor, a delay, just a subtle delay, not very loud, but it does last a while. So if I turn that up, this is what it would sound like. Too much right there, right? Okay, so after the delay or the echo, we go into a reverb. Not super wet, just a little bit, but this adds a nice amount of room. And there's also a filter on the guitar, but it doesn't really change much. Honestly, it doesn't even need to be there. But if you want the guitar to sound a bit more low in tone or make it feel literally far away from what you're listening to, a filter is a good way to do that. I guess the more professional way to put it is that a filter removes a lot of the high end, or at least this filter does. It removes high end from the guitar, so you're kind of stuck with that low end. Okay, and then so there's another electric guitar part later in the song, in the bridge. This is what it sounds like. Yeah, so I like that part a lot. I like how it feels when you're listening to the song. It's really subtle. So yeah, that's the lead parts for electric guitar. And then there's also some rhythm in the bridge, which sounds like this. a lot more delay on this. So similar plugins, but obviously they're being used differently. So this delay right here has a lot more wet signal coming through, or a lot more, you hear a lot more of the delay. It's basically the effect level is another word for wet. So that's just a little rhythm part. Sounds nice with it. And then again, since there's two electric guitar parts, I panned one a little bit left and panned one a little bit right. So let's see what these two sound like together. I think that sounds nice. It's subtle, but it adds some interest to the song. But that's it for the bulk of the instrumentation. Again, there's really not much going on. The only other parts to this are some like sound effects that I added later. You know, listening to the song a few times, thinking it'd sound good if this was here or this was there. So we can kind of jump into that. The first one is this texture. It's called Planetarium Effects 05. It's just one of the loops that you can get over here. Let's see, Planetarium Effects 05. You just drag that in wherever you want. And this is what it sounds like. I should have even mentioned it earlier. It's a pad sound, but it's really subtle. So that's just a really subtle pad part that I guess I should have mentioned earlier, and it's panned a little bit to the right. I added some rain sound just to kind of make the song sound a bit more sad, you know? And this, I think I downloaded off the internet. You can get free loops. I use a website called Looperman. So there's just this rain that starts droning at the instrumental. And then I also reversed the file for some reason. But it's still just rain sound. And there's no effects on it or anything. It's just there. Panned it a little bit to the left. And we can hear what it sounds like when it's in a mix. So you can hear that rain sound, but it's really subtle. And then there's also some thunder that comes in after the second chorus that adds. I really like that. And when you're listening to the song, again, that's super subtle, but this is what it sounds like. I'm a shirt and you're my Sharpie stain. I like that a lot. So just some basic sound effects to help the mood of the song. I added something called Keep Shining Vox Pad right here. I think this is just a transition piece, so you'll hear it swell in and kind of swell out. Yeah, so that's nice. And then later on in the song, a software instrument bass comes in. All I have is your face in my... Have a pretty intense EQ on this. It's taking out a lot of the high end because I really just want the low end. It's a bass after all. And not many effects on this one. Little bit of chorus. Actually, the chorus is mixed all the way down, so that shouldn't even be on there. See, this is what I mean. Sometimes these get really messy, and it looks good if you go in and clean it up after, but every now and then you miss some stuff. So, like, this chorus isn't being used. A little bit of distortion, which is also mixed way down, so I'm not even using that.
How'd that get in there?
And then some delay, which is all the way down, so not using that either.
How'd that
so
get
really
in there?
all I have on this bass is an EQ. That's it. And then there is a harp sound that comes in on the turnaround first. This is one of the last things I added because the turnaround still just felt a little too empty. and I thought like a little heart pluck would sound really good. So and again, these are just MIDI notes that it's just reading as it moves along. And have that panned a little bit to the left to help widen the sound a bit. You can almost barely hear it, but I think it does add something. And that is all of the instruments that I used, which it really is not a lot, but I think it fits the mood of the song well. So now we're gonna move into how I routed everything and kind of what routing is. So once you have all that, you need to mix the song together. You need to make all the instruments sound like it's one unified experience or one unified song. And that's where, mixing comes in. So we can go ahead and open up the mixer. And each one of these is a channel strip or also a track. It's all of the things that I just showed you, just laid out slightly different. So it has all, so if we're looking at Sam's vocals, it has the effects for her vocals right there, as well as the bus routing and, volume, panning, all the other bits of information that you need. So after Sam's vocals go through these effects, it then gets sent to bus 3 and bus 4. It splits off and goes to those two buses. And each one of those, so if I look up here, or I look here actually, and I find bus 3 and bus 4, you can see that on those buses, there's reverb and another channel EQ that is flat, so it shouldn't even be used.
How'd that get in there?
I think those are auto-populated, and that's why they might still be there. But there is definitely reverb going on. Now, when you have a bus like this, it's important to take the dry signal or her actual vocals and turn that all the way off, and then you still have the reverb going. So if I solo this bus right here, make sure I'm at a part in the song where her vocals are. So all you're hearing right now is the reverb. There's no dry signal. I can turn this back up. Now the dry signal is added back in. But I just want the reverb. So since her vocals are being sent to two separate buses, each one has a different reverb on it, which helps kind of widen the space. This one, I believe, is a bit longer. So if we solo bus 3 now, not bus 4. Yeah, much bigger reverb. And then together, it just adds some interest. And you can control how much of her vocals you want to send to these buses by turning, let's see, these knobs right here. So the higher that is, the more of her vocals is going to go to that bus. So that's kind of an overview. You can see a lot of instruments send, signal to these buses 4 and 3. It's just reverb. That's all I'm doing is adding reverb. What's good about this is that I can control the volume of that reverb, or I can add effects to that reverb without affecting her dry vocals. And I find it important to be able to modify reverb past just what the plugin is able to do. That way you can really fine tune the way you want your reverb to sound without affecting the natural vocals. So that was kind of complicated. I hope that made sense, but that's what these buses are. And then the next kind of quirk of my song, and honestly a lot of people do this, the output of each track is sent to unique areas. So rather than the sound from this track going straight to your headphones, it's first sent to a bigger bus is what I call it. It's still a bus, just a different routing. For example, all 3 vocals, if you see right here, hers and my 2 tracks, are sent to bus 10. Bus 10 is this highlighted channel right here, but I can then add, any effects to all 3 of those. So this channel strip sums the 3 vocal parts, and then I can add effects to it however I want. But in this case, I didn't want any effects added. I felt like I did a good job over here. And I do the same thing for pianos. Those are sent to this piano bus where there's a bit more compression. And then I also EQ'd it slightly to take out some frequencies that I really didn't like. And again, this bus is a sum of the Steinway grand piano and the soft piano that I mentioned earlier, which are both right here. So you can see they're both sent to bus 11. And if you want to change where they're sent, you just click on that, go to bus, and you choose one. but I'm sending it to piano's bus. So I have two other buses. I have a pad one. That way I can just control the volume level of all the pads summed into one. And then I can do the same for effects. So there's no effects plugins on the effects, but I can control the volume. So before we get to the final part, which is mastering, I want to talk about automation a little bit. So if I press A on my computer, each one of the things that you're looking at right now is what's called an automation line. And all of these right now are the volume automation line. So as the song goes on, the higher this line is, the louder the volume is. And it's important to do this, especially for vocals, because it's really hard to have consistent vocal recordings, especially in a bedroom like this. And sometimes you need them to be a bit louder at parts. So right here,
You took your marker to my...
she was singing a little bit quieter than she does later in the song.
Did you mean to leave me here?
So later in the song, I had to turn her vocals down a bit. And that's just what each of these lines are. I listened to the song multiple times, and as you can see, there's a lot of markers on here, but that was just key in making sure I had a consistent volume level for my vocals. And then, you know, on the pad sounds, they go up and down. At the beginning of the song, I swelled in that pad sound, so it started with nothing, and it slowly came in, and it also slowly fades out there at the end. So play around with automation. You can mess with different effects. So there's a filter on the harp, which comes in at one point, goes off at another point. And I would just encourage you to mess around with the automation. It can really add some good creativity to your song and change the dynamics as you move along. Once I had all of this done, I bounced it, I saved it, but I wanted to do one more check. So let me pull up a different Logic file and show you what I did after this point. Okay, so here we are in a separate Logic file. And after I bounced the whole song, I got it into one audio file, right? So you can go ahead and give that a listen.
And I can't see how you're gonna...
Now it's gonna sound slightly different right here because this is my mastering file. So once I have the whole bounced audio file, there's a few more ways to doctor it to make it sound even better than it already does. But I wanted an easier view of it, so that's why I bounced it in that other project file and added it to this new clean one to start off with. So we can ignore, just ignore this one.
How'd that get in there?
We're only gonna look at this audio file. So there's no effects on this track at all, but it gets sent to the stereo out channel, and that's where we add just a few more things to make the song prettier. The first of which being a linear EQ. So earlier, I don't remember which instrument I was talking about, might have been vocals or something, but I took out the low end because most speakers aren't going to play that low end. Most headphones aren't going to play it for you. Your ears really can't hear it. So taking it out helps clean up the sound a little bit. So, just removing that very, very low end can help purify the song. Then after that, we have a multimeter. And this is just like a way to view your song. I'm going to turn all these off. That way we can add them back.
Inside my mind, you dirtied up my wasted time, and I can't see how you're gonna go away.
So what you look at with this plugin is the loudness of your song, and the left side and the right side, and you want to make sure it's not in the red. If it's in the red, you have a problem. But my song was pretty quiet, so I didn't have to worry about that. This is just something that you view. I didn't add any effects with this plugin. But after that, I'm a big fan of the exciter and just add a bit more harmonics. So with it off,
You took your marker to my brain, and now what's left I can't erase. I'm assured, and you're my shirt.
so very subtle, but definitely brightens the song up a little bit. Then we go into another multipressor, just to really fine tune areas that I thought sounded iffy. But as you can see, there's not a whole lot going on here. So let's see what it sounds like.
Sharpie stain. I'm assured, and you're my Sharpie stain.
So this is just really nitpicky stuff. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I wanted to clean it up as best as I can. And, even though there's not a whole lot going here, the subtlety, I think, helps. After that, we go into a stereo spreader. Another really important plugin, but you got to be careful with it. So what this does is it takes your song and it just widens it, like I was talking about earlier with the stereo image. It widens certain aspects of it to make it sound more full when you're wearing headphones or through certain speakers. So this is what it looks like. A key note with a spreader is you don't want to spread out the low end. The low end needs to sort of stay in the center of the mix, and the high end can spread out. So that's what this is showing. This is a frequency range and everything to the right, whereas you're moving from the left to the right, it goes from low to high frequencies. I made this band narrower to get it up to these high frequencies, and then you can also change the height of the frequency or the effect that the spreader will have on your song, as well as the order. I like to keep this on even numbers, and when you're rolling through these, you can hear how it changes the way your song sounds. So let's start with the stereo spreader off, and then I'll turn it on. So very subtle, but it gets a little bit wider, and then if I move this, you should be able to hear a difference.
So can you take what's left of you before it ruins me? You're a stain inside my mind, you dirtied up my wasted time.
So that does a nice job of widening your sound, just ever so slightly. And then the last thing on the master channel is the adaptive limiter. I mentioned this earlier, how I was using a limiter in that other song, and I really shouldn't have done that. So later I learned that an adaptive limiter was the better plugin to use. So here you can just really make your song louder. So you'll definitely notice that.
Go away. You took your marker to my brain and now.
And this is important because you want your song to be loud enough so if you're listening to it on Spotify, it kind of blends in with the other songs that you're listening to. So if someone's listening to it, they listen to a previous song that they like, and then yours comes on and it's much quieter than the previous one, that can be kind of annoying. So you want your song to be as loud as you can without clipping. But yeah, that's the mastered song. And from there, you bounce it again and send it off to whatever website you use to get it out on the streaming platforms. All right, so that is how I made and produced the song Stained. I'm really proud of this, proud of the work that I did on it. Considering it was the first one that I actually released, I think it sounds pretty good. I've learned some things since I mixed this. And now for the exciting news, I'm actually coming out with another song that I produced. I didn't write it this time. It's going to be a cover of the song Gravity by Sarah Bareilles. I recorded it with Sam again and added some more instrumentation. We tried to make that song our own, and that is coming out Friday the 13th. So January 13th, 2023. Really excited about that, and maybe if this video does well, I can do a video on how I produced that one as well. But if you haven't listened to Stained yet, just look up Stained by AJ Lindsey, and when Gravity comes out, you'll actually have to look up Gravity by Avenue C. That's the name that Sam and I are moving forward with, this band that we are creating, and Gravity is going to be our debut single. Even though it's a cover, it's going to be the first one under this Avenue C name, and we're really excited about it. So when that comes out on Friday, I would encourage you to go give it a listen as well. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's at AJ Lindsey Music. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys later.
In the